3, 4, 5. I can count to 10. Okay. Where is Eden? She left? Okay. She went to the restroom. I'll have to wait. Oh, okay. Well, we have a famous person in our midst, by the way. Safa and Aday's daughter, Eden. Did you all see that she made the front page of the paper? She's not here for me to embarrass, so congratulations, Mom and Dad. What a wonderful job. So let's give them a hand. And thank you, Shirley, for bringing me the paper. She gets the credit for that. By the way, not to embarrass them, they have been here longer than I have. They actually preceded me with several others of you. So thank you for your faithfulness through the years and just investing in your kids. That's what fathers and mothers do, right? They deny themselves and they pour themselves into their children. And it's an incredible privilege. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you today on the book of Ecclesiastes about being a father. And by the way, it's one of the most honoring roles that God could ever give a man. Humbling, honoring, scary, entering the unknown, entering the uncertain. And that's exactly what Ecclesiastes talks about. However, we have confidence that God will always give us what we need. I heard someone say this past week that sometimes life might throw you a surprise, but God always provides the supplies. And dads, He is there for us if we call out to Him. Today's message, and I'm going to go ahead and admit that I'm not going to teach this passage. I will do that next week and show you how it fits in the book. But I'm going to take a text out of context and make a sermon out of it, okay? So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm being honest with you. But I think that there's some good Father's Day advice in Ecclesiastes 3, and I think it would be helpful for us, so I'm going to do that today. And I've already asked for forgiveness. But nevertheless, we'll pick up next week on the teaching of the book. But my subject for today is a time to lead. You know, there are a lot of fathers who become dads and have absolutely no idea what it means to be a spiritual leader in the home. I was one of them, by the way. We always hear that the father is the head of the house, it's his responsibility, and that he establishes the way. Well, God has some things to tell us about what it means to be a spiritual leader in the home, and it's maybe not what you think it is. But God gives us the privilege and the opportunity to represent Him to our children. Albeit we're flawed, every father has his flaws, every father has his warts, if you will allow me to say that, and every father has his weaknesses. But it's in those weaknesses and in those times of our life where we blow it that God often gives us our greatest opportunity for success. And that is because we have the opportunity to apologize and to correct where we have went wrong. And if we don't understand that and we don't see that there is a time for that, then we will miss an opportunity that God gives us with our children and with our family. So in light of that this morning, I join you to read with me Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 12. Listen to what Solomon writes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to loose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Now, I can't help but stop and give you a glimpse into next week's sermon. But what Solomon is saying here is that every person under the sun, under heaven, is a child. And we live in our Father's world. And whether we know it or not, or whether we like it or not, or whether there's anything we can do about it or not, God has ordained our world to be set up in such a way that there is a time for this and a time for that. And every human being who lives under the sun is subject to our Father who has ordained all of this. And we are totally dependent upon Him. And the wisest thing that we can do is recognize the season of life that we're in and take full advantage of it. Because you never know when one switches from this time to that time. So be ready. And that's basically the gist of next week's message. But what does God say about fathers? Well, did you know, and I've used this before, it's not mine, but it's very good, that fathers are given three primary roles: the identity of the home, the protector of the home, and the provider of the home. Some people have suggested that the father is actually the mirror in the home. This is especially true, by the way, for daughters. A lot of people don't understand that daughters find their identity in their father. Does their father tell them, you are beautiful? Does their father tell them, you are loved, you are accepted, and you are welcomed? Are fathers emotionally attached to their daughters? In other words, are they getting the affection that they need from their father? If not, they will go out and search for it from somewhere else, and they will try to find what is void in their heart that their father hasn't given them. And sometimes dads do not realize this about daughters, that actually some of the greatest advice I've ever heard, I never had daughters, but I've seen this successfully done, is that a dad is actually supposed to date his daughter until she marries. Yes, take her on a date. Show her she's important. Tell her she's beautiful. And if you do that, you will fill her life, and she won't go out looking for that in someone else that she thinks will fill their life. You say, well, I'm just not that kind of a guy. Well, come up here real close. I got to whisper something to you. Become that kind of guy. Get out of your comfort zone. Love your daughter. Hug her. Tell her she's important to you. You will never regret that. What about children? Sons. Dads are also a mirror to their sons. Is this father someone who decides that in their home he is going to be the one who steps up front and leads? Will he be the one who takes a chance? Is he the one who initiates, let's go to church? Is he the one who tries to push for, hey, let's read our Bible together. Let's pray before we go to bed. Let's pray before we eat. This should actually come from dad. If there's a dad in the home, you take the leadership in that. Oftentimes your wife is waiting for you just to say that. You don't have to be the greatest theologian in the world to give thanks to God. You don't have to know every level of systematic theology to be able to pray with your child and to share with them about God's love and what God has done in your life. Speak to your children. They find their identity in you. And some people have said that, when people look at a dad, God has set up the family and the home in such a way that children actually view God based upon how their father treats them. Now, isn't that scary? If you're a perfectionist father that's always standing over top of your child with a club every time they mess up just to crack them over the head, and there's no grace in the home, then they develop a view of God that God is just this wrathful God who all he wants to do is wait for you to mess up and boom, he's there to get you. But when you search Scripture, you don't find God as that type of an image bearer. God is in fact a gracious God, loving. And instead of an arm with a sickle and a hammer, what does he have? He has arms of outstretched love. Children find their identity in their father. But a dad is also designed to be the protector of the home. What does this mean? This means that the dad is the one who's looking out for the home to see what's going on inside that house. What is he going to allow to infiltrate the walls into the phones of his children? The type of friends that are influencing them. And it takes a lot of time, by the way. Fatherhood and motherhood is time consuming because you actually have to stop what you're doing and enter into your child's world and talk to them and more listen to them and see what's going on in their life. Who's shaping their world? Who's giving them views of what life is supposed to be like? And then as dad hears this information and he filters this information, he lovingly and patiently helps correct that. And so dads have to take charge and be the protector of the home. And also the dad is designed to be the provider of the home. Now maybe you're in a home where your wife makes more money than you do. Well, all I can say is praise God. Be glad and hope it's double what you make, right? But in some cases, that does not stop that the man is the one who provides for the home. The ultimate responsibility falls upon his shoulders to design this home in such a way that it lives within its means. What does that mean? That means that he is the one who his own with no input from his wife in any of these areas. If you have a loving relationship with your wife, that is not wise. I didn't read it. I actually listened to a podcast of a man who read a book this week. And he was talking about, he was reading this book, and one minute he was laughing, and the next minute he was crying. And it was a book about fathers. He got to the end of the book, and this is what he said. The man said, "Dad, if you are ready and able, sit down with your child and ask them this one question. You ready for this? What was it like for me to be your son? Or to be your father? What was it like for me to be your father?" And he said, then brace yourself. He said, if you have one child, you might hear one response from that child. He said, but if you have different children, he said, you might hear different responses from different children because they did not perceive you the same. He said, not only is it a humbling experience, but it's a time for growth in your own life. It's a time for you to make things right with your children where you messed up. He said, but just remember that question. What was it like for me to be your father? By the way, I'm only in the introduction this morning, but this is some good stuff. I read a quote this week, being a great father is like shaving. No matter how good you shave today, you have to do it again tomorrow. In other words, you never reach the pinnacle of fatherhood on one day when you do something great. It's never such thing that you say, well, you know what, I can just put a scotch in it and retire right there because no more is needed. That's not true. Every decision and every day is just something that goes and goes. And consistency, presence, engagement, intentionality, that is the power of fatherhood. And you know what? As a dad, when we mess up, we fess up. We tell them, hey, I want you to know something. Dad blew that one. I should not have done that. I should not have lost my temper. I should not have told you I would be here and then I didn't show up. I shouldn't have promised you this and then I knew I couldn't do it. I should have told you the truth. Please forgive me. I'll try not to do that again. But it's like shaving. It's an never-ending battle. But what I want to do today is share 7 principles to help you provide a strong foundation and lead your home from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And the first principle is, Every one of us have to recognize God's timing in life. Notice Solomon says, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Life unfolds in seasons, and each moment has its purpose, and a father has to trust God's timing in his children's growth, knowing when to guide them, knowing when to correct them, and knowing when to let them go and mess up. One of the hardest things about being a dad is shifting from this role of the protector daddy when they're really, really small into the father who will allow them to trip but be there beside them, and into the father who will then allow them to fall on their face to learn that life is sometimes hard. And every one of us undergo different seasons in our life. Some people have labeled it this way. There are seasons of preparation. This is when you're getting ready for something that God is leading you toward. There are seasons of waiting, when answers or direction seem delayed in your life or in your child's life. How do you teach them that the hardest lessons in life are sometimes learned by waiting? If you don't believe me, send your child to boot camp when they think that things work like this and like that. And you get into Uncle Sam's arms and he says, sit, shut up, stand at attention, and we will tell you when you move. And they let you stand there for days and hours and days and hours with zero promises. And you're sitting there thinking, well, all this time's passing by. And they say, we don't care what you think. You belong to us. Seasons of waiting. You know, sometimes parents have to teach our children. Wait. But I don't like to wait. Wait. Whether you like it or not, it's a part of life. There's also a season for pruning when things are being stripped away from you and you don't understand why. My dream, my goal, my this, my that, only to figure out when you look at it from the other side that God allowed those things to be taken away from you because He wanted to give you something else. There are also seasons of growth when you're learning and stretching and maturing. But you know, growth is sometimes very painful. When teenagers grow, their bones ache. When people get older, their back aches, right? It happens in life. But there's no growth without struggle. Sometimes we enter seasons of rest when God calls us to slow down and be still. And if we don't want to slow down and be still, and we just take all this pressure in our life, then God allows something to happen to our body. And believe me, He can get your attention. I mean, we may say, oh, I've got all this I've got to do. I just don't have time for anything. And all of a sudden, sickness hits you. And then you're laying flat on your back going, oh, I could slow down. Sometimes there are times for rest. Then we enter seasons of life, a season of grief, when you're walking through loss or sorrow. And all of us face that. Some of you are facing that right now. These are not wasted times. Solomon says that there's a time to live and there's a time to die. There's also a time for sickness, by the way, in life. This is a hard lesson we learn. We don't all come out of the womb healthy and live with absolutely zero problems until we go to the grave at 109. It just doesn't work that way. Sorrow and grief. Sometimes there are seasons of breakthrough when a long-awaited change finally comes and God allows this something we've desired and longed for. He opens the doors for it. These are God's timing moments. There are seasons of transition when we move from one chapter of life to the next. And by the way, please, never think that life stays the same. I mean, it just continues to change. I always laugh when people say, I don't like change. I always smile and say, whether you like it or not, just keep looking in the mirror every day. You are changing. The dark hair turns to gray hair, and the gray hair turns loose and there's no hair. And that's how life operates. It changes. There's also a season of obscurity when your faithfulness is hidden from public view And God is the only one who sees what you're doing. Maybe you're sitting at home and you think to yourself, well, I don't like this. Nobody sees what I'm doing, and I'm used to this or that. And God reminds us, I see you. And you're to be faithful to me whether somebody sees you or not, because I'm the main one who's watching. You be faithful. Sometimes God's timing allows us to endure that. There's a season for rebuilding. After a loss or a failure or a transition, when you're laying new foundations, God allows us to have this time of rebuilding in our life. And sometimes God takes things away so that we build them back. And we do it again stronger the second time. Did you know there's also a season of surrender? When you learn to release control. As a parent, by the way, this is very difficult. And I don't know the exact age because I think it differs for every child. But I want to assure you of something, young moms and dads. There is a time in your life when you can no longer control your children. And they will do what they want to do. And if you're not careful, they will do what they do in spite of what you want them to do. In other words, if you tell them no, then they'll go do it just to say yes. So build this relationship with your children to where you transition from the authoritarian to the guider to the friend. And I don't know what age that is for your kids. I wish I could tell you that, but that's a relationship. And then you build that friendship and that relationship when you finally get to the place where your dad or your mom doesn't sit down and say, you've got to do this, you've got to. Instead, they say, tell me how I can help you as you make these decisions in your life. And whether you make a good decision or a bad decision, I want you to know something. I'm there for you. But this is your decision in your life. And we have to surrender. As a parent, boy, that's tough, let me tell you. That's tough. And then there's seasons of favor, when doors open and blessings flow, and oftentimes it comes unexpectedly. The seasons of life. Well, there's a second principle, I think, that can help us, and that is learning to balance our work and our rest. This is so hard for a man. The text says, everyone, it should be verse 11, he's made everything beautiful in its time. Fathers sometimes struggle with this concept of labor and enjoyment. But a father has the responsibility to model diligence while also cherishing moments of rest and joy with his family. As dads, we can become so enamored in making work and success our identity that we neglect our kids. In other words, we work so hard for a career, and in order to have this career, your business demands so much of your life and so much extra of your life. And you know, we all have the same amount of time each day, but when that time is allotted to us, you are ultimately the one that chooses how you spend it. Invest wisely. I often remind you that at the end of everyone's retirement, when they're finished, and someone goes and asks them, what do you wish you had done more? I am yet to hear somebody say, I wish I had spent more time at the office. I am yet to hear that. I'm not saying people haven't said that. But usually on every occasion, people will say, I wish I had spent more time with my family. And sometimes, you know, fathers may say, well, I do spend time with my family. I sit on the couch and I watch a TV show with them. And by the way, a good TV show, there's nothing wrong with that because that's time. Your presence is there. But be ready, trying to balance this work and rest issue. Take some time and have fun. Take them fishing. Say, well, I don't like to fish. Well, learn how to fish. You'll like it when you go. Take time to get outside and walk and hike or play ball or do something with your kids. And by the way, one of the greatest things, and sometimes you don't learn this until it's too late, is ask your kids what they like to do. And give them one day a week to do what they want to do. Maybe just for an hour or 30 minutes, but Just ask them. And then give them that time of your life and invest it. You can always explain to them, Daddy has to go to work, Daddy has to do this in order for you to have food and a house and so forth. But when Dad's finished with this, this is your time. Tell me what you want to do. A third principle is learning to embrace change with wisdom. Now, this is sometimes difficult, and it does vary a little bit from recognizing God's timing. But as I mentioned earlier, life is full of transitions. Times to build, times to tear down. Times to speak, times to be quiet. Oh, if I could turn back the clock. Oh, how many times I wished, instead of talking, I would have listened. And it's always amazing. Your kids always remember those unguarded comments. The one that you really wish you could take back. I've mentioned this before. I've never completely studied it out, but I sometimes wonder if this is not true. Words are eternal. I know people who have heard something as a child, and they carry it to the end of their life, and they can repeat it verbatim. Maybe it was a harsh word. Maybe it was a loving word or phrase that someone said to them, but oh my, wow. And you live life, and sometimes something hits you and you don't like it, and you just want to say it like it is or like you think it should be. Can I warn me first, and then you slow down? And as the good old sage advice is, bite your tongue, count 1,001, 1,000, all the way to 10 before you say a word. Silence can never be misquoted. And sometimes we learn twice as much by listening as we do by speaking. Embrace change with wisdom. Things will come in our life. And a father has to do this. He has to learn to adapt his parenting approach as his children mature through every age. They won't always be this where you tell them exactly what they're going to do. They're going to grow. And then you allow them. I'll give you one funny. Sorry, Caleb. Caleb's my only child here today, but I have to tell this one because there's a teaching lesson in it. One time we took our kids to the state fair and we doled them out some of their money. And we told them, we're going to give you this much money. We want you to go out and you spend it wisely because once it's gone, it's gone. And this was one of the hardest things because they went straight to the carnival section. Where all the guys are sitting there. Come here, kid. For $1, I'll give you a ball. They were gone, 20, 30 minutes, and they came back crying because one of the carnival guys took their money. They were just small fellas. Now, as a dad, I'm going to be honest with you. The first thing I wanted to do was say, go up here and show me which one of these carnival guys took your money. Because I wanted to buy him a Coca-Cola and a donut. No, really, I wanted to tell him what I thought. And then I thought to myself, no, this is a very good teaching moment. This is how the world operates. And if you are not wise with your money, people will take advantage of you and they'll take it away. And guess what? At the end of the day, it's gone. And my kids, from that moment on, will come and tell you we learn more from that loss than we've learned from almost anything else as far as handling money. It was just one of those times that God allowed to come into our life. And then that is when I actually started learning this transition. You have to let them get bit sometimes. But after they get bit, you're still there for them. Very difficult. And this gets hard when your kids get older and they start dating someone you don't approve. Or they want to go and take a career job that you don't think is right. Or get ready, Mom and Dad, they get ready to move away from you to have their own life, and you don't want them to go. And the issue is really not about whether or not they're able to go or not, and whether or not they are going to fulfill their life's dreams. The issue is you don't want to let them go. And you keep clutching on to them, holding on, wondering why they can never grow because you won't let them. Sometimes you need to give them your blessing, even if you think they're messing up, and saying, you know what, this is your life. And if you feel like this is the step that you need to go in, I want you to know something. We're here to support you. We may not understand every detail, and you may not either, but if you feel like this is the direction you need to go, you step and we'll be there praying every step of the way. Learning to let go. Embracing change with wisdom. Number 4, learning to cultivate joy and gratitude. Oh, this is so good. Ecclesiastes 3:12, I perceive that there's nothing better for them to do than be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Solomon says there's times when we have to learn to have joy. Now, we've often heard as believers that, joy is something that the world can never take away from us. But did you know that you actually have to learn to be a grateful, joyful person? Maybe you have a personality of seeing a glass as half empty instead of half full. I mean, we need those kind of people in life. But maybe that's you, and you don't stop to think about all the things that you're thankful for. Just here's a challenge. Write down which day of the week you want to try to learn to be grateful. Now, we should do this every day, but maybe you have to train yourself that on Wednesdays, you're going to wake up and you're going to list 5 things you're grateful for, and you're going to tell your kids and your family about what you're grateful for. How many of us actually do that during the week? You know what? I am so thankful for you. I'm thankful for a home we have. I'm thankful for health. I mean, you can just go down this list and learn to be thankful and share that with your family. Maybe before you eat dinner, you share 1 or 2 things you're grateful for. And if you do this every day, every week, you cultivate something in your family. You're actually teaching your family that you're thankful. You're a grateful person. You recognize God has blessed your life. And you share this openly with them. And dads, man, I know this is hard to do. I want to tell you something. That's part of being a spiritual leader. That's part of setting the temperature in our home. Are we going to be a grouch? Or are we going to be grateful? And I know sometimes we all have bad days. Every one of us have bad days. Do you know that's when we need gratitude the most? So when you have a bad day this week, just get out that little notebook and those 3 or 4 things you're thankful for, and repeat them back to God. Share them at your table. You'll change the whole atmosphere in your home. You can do that, Dad. There's also a time when we have to trust in God's sovereignty. Boy, this one gets tough. God has made everything beautiful in its time. Everything. I don't have an earthly father today because in God's time, He saw fit to take mine away at a very early age, in my view. And as I got up this morning and I thought about this is one of the hardest points for me to share. He has made everything beautiful in its time. There is a time to live, and there's a time to die. I've told you in this series on Ecclesiastes, you're going to die. He has made everything beautiful in its time. I began to try to process this week. You know, the Psalm says, precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of His saints. Precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of His saints. Everything is beautiful in its time. I reflect back on that now over 20 years, and I remember my dad's almost his last words to us. And I may have shared this before. If I have, forgive me, but if not, you get it again. My brother and I were in his hospital room, and he couldn't breathe. He was gasping for air. My dad had two phobias of dying, even as a Marine. Number one, he didn't want to drown. And number two, he didn't want to suffocate. And guess what? He died by his greatest fear. He lost his breath. But as my brother and I were sitting there on the bed beside him, he mustered up enough strength to turn sideways in the bed. And he wanted us both to sit beside him so he could only pat on the bed. And he mustered up enough strength to take his arms and put up over top of both of our shoulders. And he sat there to catch his breath because that just wore him out. And this is what he said. You two boys do not know what it means for you to be here with me while I die. I didn't know what to say. What do you say? And I learned something by that. You know what I learned by that? I learned that the power of your presence is the most powerful thing you can give somebody. There were no words of wisdom that was going to change anything. It was the simple fact of being there and being silent. And those are the last words I remember my dad saying. And I had to step back and say, God, I give up. What can I do? But we sure do learn from it. Boy, it's hard. It's hard. Young people, listen to me. You're going to have to do that with your dad. Some of us had to do it at 28, and others of you might have to wait till you're 60 or 70. I don't know. I hope you have as long as you can. But let me share this. Give your parents all the presents that you can give them, because you'll never regret it. Learn to prioritize your relationships over personal success. Solomon writes, there's a time to cast away stones and a time to gather them together. When we think about prioritizing relationships, it just talks about the importance of connecting. You know, it is true that we can be present and not be engaged. You can be hanging around the house and not engage with your children. Something else that I learned, by the way, just a little tidbit of information. You go through your life and you climb in this ladder. You know, I had a professor that told us this. He said, make sure that you don't go through life climbing the ladder of success only to get to the end and find out it was leaning against the wrong wall. And sometimes people just climb that ladder and they get to the top of it and they go, oh, there's nothing here. So if there's one ladder that I can encourage you to climb today, it's the ladder of your family. And can I assure you of something? The most inconvenient times that your children want to talk to you is when you are dog-tired, wore out, or stressed out. When you're ready for bed is when they come in and want to talk for an hour and a half. And you have to get up the next morning at 5 o'clock. I promise you that's going to happen. And you know, fortunately, and I'm not saying we did this perfectly because there were some times when I couldn't, didn't. But there were certain moments in time when our kids came in and wanted to speak to us. Right during that moment, we had to stop with enough wisdom to say, sure, go ahead. How can we help? And I'm sure I blew a bunch of them. But when you take those advantages and cultivate those relationships, trust me, it's a whole lot more important than anything you'll have success-wise. And then we have to learn to teach both the value and the joy of sorrow. I should have actually saved my father's illustration for this point, but it just fit. But the bottom line is we have to learn to teach our kids that there's both joy and sadness in life. And if fathers, we don't teach our kids, there's going to be times you're going to fail. There's going to be times when you think this is your dream and you're going to chase it to find out it's a nightmare. And we have to learn to help them through this hardship and guide them as they navigate these problem waters. Because let me tell you what happens with your kids when they grow up in a Christian home. Because this is ingrained in us. We think to ourselves, oh, I'm a Christian and I'm in a Christian home, so everything I pursue is going to be blessed. As a father, sometimes we have to tell people that is just not true. Sometimes in your life, you may think that this is the road you go down, and you go down that road to find out it's got 3 more forks in it. And you take this road or that, and that's going to determine something else. I mean, there are just times of joy and sorrow in life. And a wise parent learns to help our children navigate both joy and sorrow. Well, I would be amiss if I did not share how Ecclesiastes 3 actually ties in and talks about our Heavenly Father. And by the way, for those of us who know God the Father through Jesus Christ, the song Zach sang today about how do we get to God's heart? We get to God's heart through His Son, Jesus. As we believe on Him and receive everlasting life and forgiveness of sins, we become in God's family. But, as we've been talking about in Ecclesiastes, that does not exempt us from problems. And so, how do we know that our Heavenly Father is there during different seasons of life? Well, I found this neat little thing about God in the spring, God in the summer, God in the fall, and God in the winter. Just listen to this. I thought it was so good. In the spring, when we're stepping into something new, faith, parenthood, life, God is love and He is gentle and nurturing. Isaiah 40:11, He will gently lead those that are with young. In the summertime of our life, when we're experiencing growth and exploration, seasons of decision-making, stretching, and discovery, God's love guides and anchors us through the unknown. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him and He will direct your paths. Proverbs 3. In the fall, during responsibility and harvest, the Scriptures teach us these are the times of sowing and reaping, family, vocation, legacy. And while we're there, God sustains us and prunes us and draws us closer so that we produce deeper fruit. John 15:5, if you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. But then we all experience the season of winter. Winter is a time of loss and transition. In grief or seasons of uncertainty, God's love is there even though it seems distant, in comforting and ever present. Sometimes we go through the valley of the shadow of death and we ask the question, God, where are you? You're not speaking. And He says, I'm right where I've always been. I am with you always. And then some people reach this final stage. By the way, Isaiah 46:4. Psalm 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And then the final stage of life is the twilight. The twilight is the aging and the legacy phase, so it's called, where God honors the journey of life and His love reminds us we're never too old to be seen, carried, and cherished. Do all of my older saints in here hear me? You are never too old to be loved, cherished, and carried. Isaiah 46:4, even to your old age, I will carry you. God is a good, good Father. And He never stops loving us. You are loved today. And I hope you know that. Father in heaven, I want to thank you today for your goodness to us.